welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Shake Your Powder Puff, released in 1934. It's the 84th in the series and it's directed by Friz Freleng. A high definition version of this short has shown up recently, and thankfully it also includes the intro and the outro, because there was a semi-restored version that was lurking around that had the end and the front cut out for some reason. Don't know why, but it's good to see it restored, but it'll be even better if we can see this one on disc at some point. But in case you haven't seen this one, it is sadly under copyright, so I can't show you the full cartoon here, but it's a review that takes place on a farm somewhere where we see a string of different gags which involve giving off a show to all the paying customers, and it involves a rude customer who doesn't like what's being shown. There's not really much to this one, but I'll go through it anyway. So first up you're going to see is a re-edit of the original commentary I did before I had to take that down. We'll then hear some new thoughts from me, and then from my good friend Manny, the Toonie tenor. He's going to go through the musical aspect of this short, as it is a Merry Melody short. So without further ado, let's get into it. You can see in the animators credits, you got Bob Clampett, and this cartoon, like this gag here where everyone's saying shh, shh, and, you know, annoying the conductor. This cartoon screams Bob Clampett, and you know, and it's definitely comparable to some of the later stuff that he would do, or even some of the stuff that Tex Avery did. It's just a really bizarre cartoon. I don't think he actually did an uncredited directing or anything, but this one just feels like he worked a lot more on. And if you look at the background there, see how it's all just painted picture? That's pretty good. But look at the hats on top of the horn. As I mentioned, this cartoon really does scream Bob Clampett, because this is definitely very much his sensibilities. Whereas when you watch a Friz Freleng one, you know, he doesn't do this sort of stuff. That's not to say he was never wild about any gags or anything, but I don't know. I don't see this sort of stuff very often where it's like, boo, boo. We're now going to see some... I just like the expression of that conductor. But we're going to see the title song very shortly, and this is probably a good way for them to fulfill their obligation. That was pretty cute with the ducks there. But here it is there. You got the old Shake Your Powder Puff. You know, you got the dancing bunny girls. Here we go. We got cameo appearances of Donald Duck. 3 of them, in fact. Or seemingly like an off-model Donald Duck. Now, I think that's just a coincidence. You know, I don't think they deliberately looked for a sailor duck, given that Donald actually appeared roughly around this time anyway in his first cartoon, which is of course the Wise Little Hen. I like how this barn looks somewhat small on the outside like that, and yet it's this big thing on the inside. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong, maybe there's a bigger attachment. I guess this might be a precursor to Porky, right? Which of course Friz would direct in his first appearance. We're actually not that far along to go. And we've got some dancing chickens now, and you know, I thought this is pretty cheeky, and again, this is very much in the vein of the Looney Tunes that we know and love. So the animation is still somewhat stuck in the early 30s style for the most part, but it's definitely getting a lot better. And that's not to say that this is terrible or anything, but love that laughter. Yuck, 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 yuck. I'll try and do impersonation. So those are my original thoughts. So rewatching this one again, this short actually feels a lot like a lot of the earlier Mickey Mouse shorts. And I don't know how many you guys may have seen, but I've seen every single Mickey Mouse short, and pretty soon they'll be in the public domain anyway, so you'll get to see them all pretty soon, fairly easily. But you got shorts like The Opry House, Mickey's Follies, The Barnyard Concert, Blue Rhythm, the Barnyard Broadcast, and Mickey's Review, and they're all got the exact same concept, where it's basically a show with all sorts of funny segments strung together, and there's usually a subplot of someone or something out to disrupt what is happening on stage. And this particular setting would continue to be used not just at Disney, but like with the upcoming The Band concert that was released in 1935, but also at Warner Brothers itself, like Amateur Hour. And it's interesting because Frizz worked for Walt, and Frizz still had an admiration of what Walt was doing. He has gone on record saying that him and his crew would go and watch the latest Disney shorts in the cinema, and then coming out kind of dejected because what they were doing, they felt they didn't meet their level of quality or something along those lines. I'm definitely paraphrasing there. So it's quite possible that he's watched a lot of those type stories, and for this short, it kind of feels like it's a bit of a filler, like a quickie short that they strung together just to get it out of the way to meet a quota. So this might have been a case of Frizz seeing these type of stories before and just deciding to do one of his own. Anyway, that information is lost to time. I'm just speculating with that, but it definitely feels like a lot of the early 30s Mickey Mouse shorts, and late 20s too, of course. Now, many crews will go through the song itself, the title song being Shake Your Powder Puff, and in case you don't know, these early Merry Melodies were out to promote music, and it's usually from a Warner Brothers movie. So the song comes from the movie Upper World, and that came out about 6 months before this short. But I did want to point out that coincidentally, that movie also contains a rendition of Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, which was a huge smash hit, and that came from Disney's Three Little Pigs. And that was pretty much an anthem for the Great Depression at the time. It's a big morale booster. So I just thought it was interesting seeing that you not only have a song that's featured in a Warner short, but also something from a Disney short at the same time. So there we are. So let's take a look at the shorts. So just to put things into perspective, so a review at the time was like a string of different performances. Like you might have a song performance of one bit, then you might have a comedy act, then you might have a small dramatic retelling of a certain scene from maybe a book or a play or something. So there's no overarching story. So it's not like a Broadway musical where you'd go and see one show. Like if you saw, I don't know, Hamilton or something, you'd have Hamilton the entire way through. And I was reading further into these reviews, and a lot of them had very high ticket prices, and they're somewhat comparable to what can be charged today for the cheap seats on Broadway, which I thought was very interesting. I thought this sort of thing would have been a cheap show for people to see, like the lower middle class type people. But yeah, in case you're wondering what a review is, that's pretty much what it is. I do have to wonder, there's a cute little gag with the fireflies doing the light. I mean, this farm probably doesn't have running electricity because, hey, we're talking about the early 30s here, and a lot of rural areas still didn't even have electricity at the time. I do have to wonder, though, how much are those fireflies getting paid for their job lighting up the sign? But yeah, I know, I'm overthinking it. And you'll always seem to see in these shorts the asbestos written as like a curtain. It's in quite a few shorts. And in case you were wondering, at the time, asbestos was seen as like a wonder material because it was a great fire retardant. But over time, people were getting sick from this, and it usually is like a long-term illness. You wouldn't notice straight away, but after a while, you would have a certain condition that's affecting your lungs. So it's banned in most places worldwide now, and even to this day, a lot of asbestos is still having to be removed. And I like that little shot where we see the mother pig walking the kid away, and being a parent, you just know that that shot is all about the mother pig going, I asked if you needed to go to the toilet before, and you said no, and as soon as we sit down and the show's about to start, you want to go toilet. Fine. It just has that face. As a parent, you know that that's what's going on in that scene. I thought it was a nice little touch there. Or maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I read it anyway. Now, I mentioned this in the track, but I do like that shushing bit. It's like everyone's just shushing each other, and much to the annoyance of the conductor. Someone said that this conductor is Leopold Stokowski, but I don't buy it. I think it's just a generic conductor. But hey, if you think that this conductor is referencing anyone, definitely let me know in the comments, because I definitely want to know. Now, I'm not a musician. I can't play an instrument. I can't really carry a tune, but I think I found something that I could do as a potential musician. Gargling and spitting water to music. I think I found my calling. Look out, the world of orchestras. I'm now coming your way. It's such ridiculous. And to think this person's sole job is just to gurgle at this particular song. So yeah, there you go. And if you look at the painted background, and of course this is clearly a way for them to save money, because at the time these shorts weren't exactly the highest budgeted, but the characters just look so creepy, especially in this restoration. Now you can have a look at the details. I'm sure the audiences at the time wouldn't have really noticed too much. But now that we can actually freeze frame this stuff, you can take a look, and some of it's just absolutely creepy. And Freeze will do that in a lot of his shorts as well. And again, it's probably just a way to keep the budgets within reason. And we see mice. So we've already referenced the fact that this short seems to be inspired by some of those Mickey Mouse shorts. And hey, we've got those typical Frizz mice that he likes to put in a lot of these shorts. So there we are. And we also see someone sleeping in the audience. Maybe this guy is so rich that he doesn't care, but given how expensive reviews could be, looks like somebody just paid their money just to sleep there. I know, I'm overthinking it, I know, but yeah, it's just like people in the cinema, that they go in the cinema these days, they pay all this money to see a movie and they're still on their phone, and much to the annoyance of everyone, and why I don't really go much to the cinema anymore, that kind of thing. We see the title song, which again, my friend will go through the origins and whatever's relevant to music in this, but I like this particular scene because you also see that nice behind the scenes shot of the stagehand moving those waves. There's a nice touch. And then we see those quote unquote Donald Ducks. Now, I'll just put this into perspective because this is one of those weird coincidences. So this short came out on the 29th of September, 1934. Give or take, there might have been a place that maybe played a little bit earlier or something, but that's roughly when it came out anyway. But you also had The Wise Little Hen, and that came out on the 9th of June 1934. So yes, it came out earlier than this short. I doubt that they copied Donald Duck from that short, okay? Because it takes a while to make these animated shorts. This would have been fully animated by early 1934. So I don't think they would have gone back and just redone it as Donald Ducks, right? Because Donald Duck was a breakout character, more due to Clarence Nash's voice. But anyway, now if you listen to the song lyrics actually mention sailors. So what's a good idea to have here? Ducks dressed as sailors. Makes sense. It's appropriate for the song. So I guess it's just one of those really odd coincidences that they just happen to look like Donalds. And as we all know, Frizz is no stranger to coincidences. If you look at the Cat Concerto controversy that came out about 12 years after this short, yeah, Freeling definitely is no stranger to controversies in that kind of way. But I do believe that this is just coincidence. So we see this animation of these goats with these hats that don't fit their horse. I thought it was pretty cool. But the animation here looks like a dance that Bosco used to do in Lower Shorts, and they'll just recycle the same animated cycle over and over again just to save on costs. Now, I see Bob and Kimpson's credited. I wonder if this animation was his, because the drawings look pretty solid, but I honestly don't know. I'm not an expert on that, but if I was a betting man, I'd probably say it was. But anyway, I still think it's great animation, regardless of who actually did it. Then we see, we can't please everyone. We see our so-called antagonist now who gets drunk and causes trouble. Now, the funny thing about this frame, it's kind of a weird history because you'll see that he's holding his nose saying something stinks, right? Sunset Productions actually had the ownership of the black and white Merry Melodies in the mid-50s, and they were selling it to television markets so they can obviously show it to their audiences. And one of the things they did was they removed the Warner Brothers intro and they replaced it with their own Sunset Production opening. And one of the frames was this obscure character holding his nose, which very bizarre. But that's where that comes from, in case you were wondering where that picture came from. Now, the pig scene, it's not really a funny scene, but I like the song enough, and it's a charming one. I don't mind that little bit, but it's just not haha funny. It's like, okay, there's 3 sized pigs, whoop-de-doo, right? But anyway, one reference I couldn't find is the line, Jones is the name, I'm one of the Jones boys. I can't seem to find any reference anywhere, and I did ask around too, and no one seems to know. I wonder if that's from some obscure radio show, obscure movie, I don't know. But if you do know the answer, definitely let me know. I definitely want to know. The more I look at this antagonist, the more he seems like a combination of Goofy and Pluto. Yes, I know, they're both dogs, I'm aware of that, but it's just this weird combination of the two characters. So, what's his evil plan? Well, his plan is to make the audience sneeze and make those chicks naked. Why not? Why not? And I guess it's a way to say that, these weren't exactly made for just kids, because that's quite an adult joke if you really think about it. And we then hear a Goofy type, yuck. So this is probably a take on Disney's Goofy in the sense, because Goofy's first appearance as Dippy Dog was earlier enough for Friesen the artist to notice Pinto Colvig's last delivery in the short Mickey's Review. That was the first time he would go, you hook, and all that. So maybe they pinched it for this. I don't know. But everyone rips off everyone anyway, back in the days. But he definitely didn't rip off Donald, but I'm pretty sure he ripped off Pinto Colving's now trademark laugh. So we hear a line later on, is everybody happy? And that comes from Ted Lewis, who was an entertainer and band leader. And that gag was used many times in Bosco, so we finally see one all these years later in a Merry Melody short, so there we are. And I liked at the end, and that's all folks, which has been restored, thankfully, on this HD release. I just like the fact he goes, that's all folks, and just gets pelted with vegetable. I thought that was a pretty nice touch. Now, I've been yammering on and on long enough. My good friend Manny Cruz, the Toonie Tenor, is going to go through the origin of the song and a few other bits and pieces as relevant. So, take it away, Manny.
Hi, everyone. This is Manny Cruz, the Toonie Tenor, coming at you with the latest edition of It's Time for Manny's Music Time with music trivia for you today. Bump! I'm trying to do that in one breath now. And today, or tonight rather, because I'm recording this at night, I will be talking about the 1934 Merry Melody, Shake Your Powder Puff, directed by Isidore Friz Freleng. I keep trying to fight the urge to say Shake Your Tail Feather, which is a Ray Charles composition. Anyway, let's talk about this song. So there's a few cues that I want to go over and dig into a little bit more of the history of the classical musicians that you hear their pieces featured in this particular cartoon. So the title tune itself, Shake Your Powder Puff, has music written by Sammy Fine, and the lyrics were by Irving Cahall, and the song is from 1934 because it originally premiered in the 1934 Warner Brothers film Upper World. In the film, Ginger Rogers sings this song with a group of chorus girls at a burlesque theater. And as you see the cartoon itself, it's set up in a theater, in a review, and you have the audience and all that other stuff, and the drunk dog, who's pretty much like I guess the Warner Brothers equivalent of of Goofy after the brief tenure of Goopy Gear was done. They said, hey, let's try something new.
When you see a sailor boy, don't pretend to be so coy. Step right up your ship, ahoy, and shake your powder puff. If he doesn't fall for you, do what any girl would do. Paint your lips a reddish hue and shake your powder puff.
If you want to learn a little bit more about the songwriters themselves, Sammy Fine and Irving Cahall, I highly recommend that you listen to the commentary for One Step Ahead of My Shadow that I recorded a while back for more information about them. So then the cartoon, so you have the conductor coming up, doing his thing. He has his orchestra ready to play. And the conductor starts with the overture to William Tell. Shocker. We've never heard that one before in animation. The overture to William Tell, as I've mentioned in the previous commentary, comes from the opera William Tell, which premiered in 1829, and it was composed by one of the greatest opera composers of all time, the Italian composer Gioacchino Rossini. The conductor, when he starts a performance, like I said, he's actually doing the third part of the overture, which is called, I can't pronounce the French, because William Tell, the opera is originally in French, and my French is terrible. But for this section, it's called The Call to the Cows, which is a pastoral scene that represents the calm after the storm. And the instrument that's a solo in this one is an English horn, or the cor anglaise. I think that's how you say it in French again. Or think of all the times in animation. Because what's cool about off the top of my head, with the William Tell overture, I mean, everybody knows the fourth and final part of the overture. I mean, this overture is like a symphony in itself. It has four distinct parts. You have the beginning, which has a group of cellos playing a somber piece of music. I've never heard the first movement played in a cartoon. I can't think of one off the top of my head. The second part is the storm. For example, I'm going to be recording soon the commentary for Speaking of the Weather, and you hear the storm in that cartoon. I mean, also there's Case of the Stuttering Pig starts with the second part of that overture. fourth part, boom. Think of the Lone Ranger, probably the most famous part of the overture. I actually heard it today in a commercial. But the third part is also pretty well known. Think of a scene where a character is waking up. I'm thinking of Porky and Wacky Land when you see all the characters lifting up the sun, and Porky looks at it and he makes like, oh, that's ridiculous. And then he does a take, the do 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 do. So, what exactly is an overture? Because I know that people hear that, and I mentioned in other commentaries like a definition of it, but here's an exact definition. So, an overture, and this comes from the On Music Online Dictionary, it is an introductory movement for orchestra intended to introduce an opera, oratorio, or other dramatic vocal composition by presenting themes to be heard later in the composition. It's also an independent composition for orchestra. In this case, it's called a concert overture. So yeah, this pretty much introduces the music that you're going to hear later on. I mean, lots of different overtures have been used in Warner Brothers cartoons, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that for the next piece. So, speaking of the next piece, we have the overture to The Poet and the Peasant by Franz von Suppe. And that's the music that you hear for the main part of the performance by the orchestra. And that's when the turtle starts using his plastron as like a timpani. That's when it starts. And I learned what a plastron is from Ninja Turtles. So thanks for that, Cowabunga. So who exactly is Franz von Suppe? So this information, I got a lot of it, obviously, from different music websites and whatever. But I'm taking a large chunk of Franz von Suppe's bio, as well as information about the Poet and the Peasant Overture itself, from the San Francisco Symphony website, and some program notes that were written by James Keller. So thank you for that. So Franz von Suppe was born April 18th, 1819. That's a little confusing. April 18th, 1819. And he was born on a boat which was near Spalato, Dalmatia, or Dalmatia. It looks like Dalmatia without the N at the end, which is now part of Croatia. And he died May 21st, 1895, in Vienna, Austria. The Poet and the Peasant made its premiere on August 24th, 1846. The composer conducted at the premiere of the operetta of the same name in Vienna. So Wien is Vienna in German. So what is an operetta? So this once again comes from the On Music Dictionary. The word, which is derived from opera, an operetta is a less serious form of opera made up of spoken dialogue, songs, and dances. The operetta is typically written to have a popular appeal to the audience of its day. The modern operetta had its beginnings in the 19th century with the works of Jacques Offenbach, who composed more than 90 of them. Today, the term musical or Broadway musical has the same meaning. So this is pretty much the 19th century version of musicals, stuff like Andrew Lloyd Webber, the stuff you see on Broadway, the stuff you see on the West End in England. And speaking of Offenbach, I performed one of his operettas, the Orpheus in the Underworld, in my first year of graduate school. And you're probably saying, what the heck is Orpheus in the Underworld? Besides, if you know the story of Orpheus and Eurydice or Eurydice, that story has been used countless times in music and art and literature and all this other stuff. But Offenbach's Orpheus in the Underworld in the fourth act features the can-can. Da, 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 da. So that's where it comes from originally. And it was cool when we did that when I was in grad school. We had a bunch of dancers from another department of the school dress up as devils and do the dance. And I think it was called, in French, is Galop Enfer, so like a hell dance or something like that. But it's a goofy opera. It's a load of fun. I was Orpheus himself in the production. And he's barely in it. He's the main character. He's named after, and he's barely in the opera. Now, let's talk about The Poet and the Peasant once again, and a little information about the maestro, Franz von Suppe. And these are the program notes from a performance of The Poet and the Peasant Overture. Remember, this is the beginning of the operetta itself. Here's a condensed version of the program notes from James Keller, and I quote, "Take a deep breath and marvel at the name of Francesco Ezechiele Ermengildo Cavaliere di Suppe de Melli." Not bad for being rusty in Italian. Back to the program notes. That Italian remark, that's me. That's Manny Cruz's stuff. Yeah. All right, back to the program notes. Who in daily life went just by Franz von Suppe. Croatia is proud to claim him as its own, and he was indeed born in what is now that country, although at the time it was in the kingdom of Dalmatia. Let's just go with Dalmatia or Dalmatia, within the Austro-Hungary Empire, unquote. So yeah, those of you in the comments, please feel free to rip me apart with my pronunciation of the name of that country. It's Dalmatian without an N. That's what it looks like. So yeah, which is now Croatia. Anyway, back to the program notes. And I quote, "His parents were Austrian, and his father was assigned to, there's that country name again, in a civil servant capacity. The father was actually of Belgian extraction. Franz was distantly related to Gaetano Donizetti, who encouraged a career as a composer," unquote. So Donizetti is a composer that I'm pretty familiar with, being a singer. He is one of the pioneers of the bel canto technique of opera, where bel canto literally means beautiful singing. His music requires a lot of legato phrase, a lot of legato, so nice and smooth phrasing while you're singing, impeccable breath control, and also a lot of vocal agility to perform his music. So I've done some of his operas and I've done some of his art songs before. And I didn't even know till today that von Suppe and Donizetti were distant relatives. So back to the program notes. And I quote, "He was also," talking about Franz von Suppe, "he was also an accomplished singer. And one of the roles in which he appeared professionally was Dulcamara, the basso snake oil salesman in Donizetti's The Elixir of Love, or I'll just say in English, The Elixir of Love." Oh, I didn't even know. That's cool. He performed in The Elixir of Love, a very famous opera from Donizetti. Probably his most famous one, you could argue. Back to the program notes. Italy figured prominently in his upbringing. While being schooled in Cremona and Padua, he basked in the musical opportunities of the region, even meeting Rossini. Look at that, tying back to the William Tell Overture. Verdi, so Giuseppe Verdi, probably the most famous Italian opera composer in history, and his distant cousin Donizetti in Milan. After his father's death, Franz and his mother moved to Vienna, where he threw himself into his musical studies. So I jump ahead in the program notes, blah, 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 and I continue. Von Suppe's operettas were of their time, and almost none of them are produced today. What keeps his name alive are his operetta overtures, principally those for his Dichter und Bauer, which is The Poet and the Peasant, 1846. So that's Dichter, Poet, Peasant, Bauer. And actually, I digress once again. So, I've learned that word when I was an undergrad because there's a very famous song cycle from, I think it was Robert Schumann, or Franz Schubert or Robert Schumann. I don't know it off the top of my head. But it's called Dichterliebe, which means poet's love. And it's a very famous song cycle that singers perform. And Bauer, I know people whose last name is Bauer. You would say it in English, Bauer, but I did not know Bauer means peasant. So, well, I had a teacher in high school named Miss Bauer, math teacher, not a nice lady. And now that I know that her last name meant peasant, I feel kind of better now. All right, back into the program notes. So yeah, The Poet and the Peasant, which premiered in 1846, and the Leichte Cavaliere, or Cavalieri, or in English, the Light Cavalry, 1866. But sometimes those for Eine Morgen, Mittag und Abend in Wien, which in English is Morning, Noon, and Night in Vienna, 1844, and Die Schöne Galatee, or The Beautiful Galatea, 1865. Von Suppe had already used some of the material from The Poet and the Peasant overture in two works before this overture reached its final form, heading the opera that would make it famous. Its delicious episodes include a lyrical cello solo, an infectious waltz, and a syncopated can-can flavored Allegro Sprezitoso, which is a boisterous allegretto. Allegretto is something else. That's another tempo marking. They suggest that the entire operetta must be a delight, though few of us can hope to ever see it on stage, unquote. Yeah, like I've never heard of anybody performing The Poet and the Peasant or Morning, Noon, and Night in Vienna. I'm like, no, I know the overtures, but I don't know anything about the actual operas or operettas they come from. And speaking of the ones that I mentioned in this article, so Morning, Noon, and Night in Vienna, that's the piece of music that Bugs conducts in Baton Bunny. So dun 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 bum bum. And Die Schöne Galatea, or the Beautiful Galatea, is the piece of music that's being conducted during the famous Leopold scene from Long-Haired Hair.
Leopold! 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 Leopold!
So that's, look at that. You have multiple pieces of Von Suppe's music used in Warner Brothers cartoons. The Light Cavalry. Bum, ba-da-da-dum, bum, bum, bum. If I'm not mistaken, that was, I'm trying to think, it's a Disney cartoon. I think Symphony Hour from the 40s with Mickey and Donald and Goofy and the rest. That's what Mickey's conducting, the Light Cavalry Overture in that cartoon. And speaking of The Poet and the Peasant, it's not just Warner Brothers cartoons that use it. There's an actual cartoon that was done by Walter Lantz, his studio. I think that has either Andy Panda or Woody Woodpecker conducting it, but the cartoon literally uses The Poet and the Peasant Overture. And there's other Warner Brothers cartoons down the road that will use The Poet and the Peasant Overture. But this is one of the first ones to do it, and it's a very famous piece of music. Oh, how could I forget? One of my absolute favorite Popeye cartoons features The Poet and the Peasant Overture, the Spinach Overture from 1935. Probably arguably in my top 5 of Popeye cartoons from the Fleischer days. And yeah, so if you want to listen to The Poet and the Peasant, you got Woody Woodpecker or Andy Pan, I forgot. Popeye, this cartoon, there's other Warner Brothers cartoons that I can't think of off the top of my head. And like I said, for the Light Cavalry, watch Symphony Hour from Disney. And the Beautiful Galatea, you got Long-Haired Hair for that one. The last piece of music that we hear in the cartoon is featured near the end is called While I Swan by Benjamin Hapgood Burt. Not too much information about this one. I mean, I looked it up, and the composer, he was born June 27th, 1882, and he died September 19th, 1950. The song was originally recorded back around the year 1910 by Byron Harlan, and the version that I heard, which was on the needle drop notes from James Parton on the Cartoon Research website. Thank you, James, because a lot of the Manny's Music Time information that I get, or like pretty much an origin point to where I go, comes from the needle drop notes. Please check those out. He does information for the music featured in not just Warner Brothers shorts, but other studios like Van Buren and Fleischer and so on and so forth. But yeah, in his column for Shake Your Powder Puff, he has a recording of this song, and it's performed by Al Bernard in it. And I was listening to it. It's like, typical hick, yeehaw, kind of vibe to it. Or I guess that's a hick. I don't know. I'm a city boy. So yeah, these are my thoughts for Shake Your Powder Puff. I mean, the cartoon itself is pretty neat. As Anthony will mention in his commentary, because I listened to it, it kind of gives you vibes of the early Mickey Mouse shorts that have reviews and, theatrical performances, and little bits and pieces of vaudeville. The dog itself was pretty funny. Some of the expressions that the conductor was making were making me laugh in particular. It's like, yes, I know. I have experience being a choral conductor, and just those faces that you make when, either your fellow musicians or the audience is just not cooperating. I see the mice playing the xylophone. And then they do the which is played in a staccato manner, but you have a duck quacking, quack, 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 quack. Love that part of the overture. And one thing that I guess to quote the Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie episode of The Simpsons, oh, gee, I hope somebody got fired for that blunder. that there's a dog playing the saxophone in the orchestra, and a saxophone is really not an orchestral instrument, and I'm 99%. You know what? I won't even guess because I still have the program notes from The Poet and the Peasant Overture. The instrumentation. So what instruments are used? You got 2 flutes, 1 doubling a piccolo, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, 4 horns, 2 trumpets, 3 trombones, a tuba timpani, bass drum, harp, and strings. Saxophone is not an orchestral instrument. Now, if you write a piece of music for an orchestra, sure, you can put as many saxophones as you want, but traditionally it's not. And the saxophone was only a few years old. It was invented, I believe, in 1840 by Adolph Sax. So yeah, it would have been a really new instrument. It didn't really become popular until the early 20th century. It was used in military bands, and then it started moving its way towards jazz and rock and roll, and now it's one of the most popular instruments out there. I'm digging the part where you have the stage hands moving like the waves for the performance when the 3 wabbits do the title track. And really digging this restoration that was done not too long ago. I mean, I remember watching this cartoon for the first time several years ago when I started binging all the Warner Brothers shorts, and it looked terrible. And now, I got to see the new restoration on MeTV, and it's also cool to see just the original ending because I never saw that before, where the dog says, that's all, folks, and he gets pelted in the face with a pumpkin. And I'm trying to remember who said it. Might have been Matt Hunter. He made a comment online, or maybe somebody else, that somebody mentioned that you're already seeing hints of just how awesome Frizz's musical timing is, or timing in general. Because both times that the dog is pelted in the face with the pumpkin, it's just like he does a face, or he says, "So long, folks," boom, gets pelted in the face with the pumpkin. And that's a gift to have that type of comedic timing and musical timing that, I mean, all the great directors had it, but Frizz definitely was probably arguably the best of all of them. So yeah, one more time, these are my thoughts and Manny's music time for Shake Your Powder Puff, not Shake Your Tail Feather. Hope you enjoy. Please follow me on social media at the Toonie Tenor, T-E or T-H-E. Why do I always say te? T-H-E-T-O-O-N-E-Y, T-E-N-O-R. For more information about my life as a musician and as a multifaceted geek. Got plenty of Looney Tunes stuff on there. And thanks for supporting Anthony's channel. Thanks for listening. And let's see if I can do the dog as best as I can. That's all, folks. But now somebody has hit me in the face with a pumpkin. And that would hurt a lot. Plus, pumpkins are out of season now. I'm recording this in January. I don't know. What do you throw at me? Snowball? Well, actually, no. There's no snow outside. It's rainy. All right. Anyway, see ya.
That's all, folks.
So this short just feels more like a filler. It just feels like, hey, they needed to scramble something quickly together and that's it, just release it. And they pretty much did what they knew. And they just revisited an idea that was done many times before, especially by Disney. But the song's really good. The gags are fine. They're funny, and it's not crazy funny or anything. It's definitely one of the better Frizz shorts, but it's not particularly memorable either. It's just a quick 6-minute thing, and you've pretty much forgotten about it once you've seen the wonderful "That's all, folks" at the end. This one gets 6 out of 10. It's fine. It's worth watching. And hopefully this will make its way on physical media at some point soon. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.